never thought a regular school day could turn into a nightmare. My name is Mark, and I'm a 15-year-old student at Green Valley High. I was in my second period history class when the announcement came over the intercom. This is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Those words sent a shiver down my spine. We'd had drills before, but something about the tone in the principal's voice told me this was different. Our usual history teacher was out sick, so we had a substitute that day, Mr. Langley. I'd never seen him before, but he seemed nice enough when class started. He was a tall, thin man with sharp features and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. As soon as the announcement ended, Mr. Langley calmly told us to move to the corner of the classroom, away from the windows and door. At first, we did as we were told, whispering nervously among ourselves, but something about Mr. Langley's behavior made me uneasy. He seemed too calm, almost like he was enjoying the situation. He kept glancing at his phone, and every time he did, a slight smile would creep onto his face. The minutes dragged on, turning into hours. The room was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of Mr. Langley's phone. We sat in silence, listening for any sounds from outside, but all we could hear was our own breathing and the occasional creak of the building settling. My friend Sam, who was sitting next to me, whispered, "Something's not right about him. Why does he keep checking his phone?" I didn't know what to say. I had been thinking the same thing, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. After all, maybe he was just trying to stay informed. But as time went on, my suspicions grew. Mr. Langley didn't seem concerned or worried like the rest of us. Instead, he seemed excited. His behavior was unsettling, and my mind started racing with possibilities. What if he was involved in whatever was happening outside? What if he was waiting for a signal to do something terrible? I glanced around the room, looking at my classmates' faces. Most of them were pale and scared, their eyes wide with fear. We were all on edge, but none of us dared to speak up. We didn't want to draw attention to ourselves or give Mr. Langley any reason to focus on us. Eventually, my fear turned into a plan. If something happened, I'd be ready to make a run for it. I didn't know where I'd go, but I couldn't just sit there waiting. I whispered to Sam, telling him to be ready to move if things got worse. He nodded, his face pale but determined. Suddenly, we heard footsteps in the hallway, loud and echoing. They stopped right outside our door. My heart pounded in my chest as the door handle rattled, and Mr. Langley's eyes darted to the door, that strange smile still on his face. The door burst open, and a group of police officers stormed in, their guns drawn. "Everyone stay calm," one of them shouted. "We're here to get you out safely." Mr. Langley stood up, raising his hands. "Officers, there's no need for alarm," he said in a calm voice. But his words didn't match the situation. The police weren't there for us. They were there for him. "Mr. Langley, you're under arrest," the officer said, cuffing his hands behind his back. "You have the right to remain silent." As they led him away, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The man who had seemed so calm and in control was part of a planned attack on the school. He was supposed to unleash chaos from within, using our trust against us. The police quickly escorted us out of the classroom, and as we moved through the hallways, I saw the chaos we'd been shielded from. There were police everywhere, their presence both reassuring and terrifying. We were safe, but the reality of what had almost happened hit me hard. Outside, my parents were waiting, their faces filled with relief and worry. I ran to them, grateful to be alive, but shaken by how close we'd come to disaster. The news spread quickly, and the story of what had happened at Green Valley High was all over the media. Mr. Langley was part of a group planning an attack, and his role was to ensure chaos from within. The police had intercepted their plans just in time, saving us from what could have been a terrible tragedy. I still think about that day, about how quickly things can change and how dangerous the world can be. It's a lesson I'll never forget, a reminder that sometimes the real danger isn't outside, but much closer than we'd like to believe. It was just another ordinary day at Willow Creek High. The bell had rung for the last period, and I found myself sitting alone in Mr. Caldwell's classroom, finishing up some work. Everyone else had left, eager to head home or to their next class. The school was unusually quiet, and I enjoyed the silence, thinking I'd finally get some peace to finish my project. Suddenly, the loudspeaker crackled to life. "Attention, students and staff. We are now entering a lockdown. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." My heart skipped a beat. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. What was happening? The first thing I did was grab my phone. A flood of messages from friends filled the screen, each one more confusing than the last. "Someone saw a man with a gun." "No, I heard it's a gas leak." "Stay calm, just stay hidden." I could hear faint sounds from the hallway, like muffled voices and hurried footsteps, but no one came to lock the door or check on me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why was I alone? Where was everyone? I moved quickly, dragging a desk over to the door to barricade it. The wooden legs scraped against the floor, the noise loud in the otherwise silent room. I ducked behind another desk, trying to steady my breathing. The only light came from the fading daylight streaming through the windows, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. My phone buzzed again, but the messages were only getting stranger. "There's a man in the hall near the science wing. Someone said they saw him outside." "No, he's in the cafeteria." Nothing made sense. How could the intruder be in so many places at once? My hands were shaking and I could barely type a response. My thoughts raced, trying to figure out what was going on. I had never felt so scared, so completely alone. Then, without warning, the power went out. The hum of the fluorescent lights died, plunging the room into near darkness. My heart pounded in my chest and I could barely breathe. The faint glow from my phone was the only light left, casting an eerie blue tint on my hands. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps approaching the classroom. Each step echoed in the silent hallway, growing louder and louder, closer and closer. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. The door handle rattled, and I could hear someone breathing just outside. The door slowly creaked open, the sound like nails on a chalkboard in the stillness. I peered out from under the desk, my heart pounding in my ears. A figure stepped into the room, silhouetted against the dim light from the hallway. It wasn't a teacher. It wasn't anyone I recognized. They were wearing a mask, a plain white mask that covered their entire face. They turned slowly, scanning the room as if they knew someone was inside. I pressed myself closer to the ground, willing myself to disappear. The figure took a few steps inside, then reached behind them and quietly locked the door from the inside. The sound of the lock clicking into place sent a wave of panic through me. My phone buzzed again, and I frantically tried to call for help, but the screen went black. The battery had died. I was trapped alone with this masked figure in the dark. The figure moved closer, their footsteps echoing in the empty room. I could hear their breathing, slow and steady, almost inhumanly calm. They stopped just a few feet away from my hiding spot. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying they wouldn't find me. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. The figure paused, their head turning sharply towards the door. The footsteps grew louder, faster, and then nothing. Silence. The figure stood there for what felt like an eternity, frozen, as if deciding what to do next. Then, without a word, they turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body was paralyzed with fear. After what felt like hours, I finally mustered the courage to crawl out from under the desk. I crept towards the door, peeking out into the empty hallway. The school was deathly silent. No voices, no footsteps, nothing. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get out of there. I stumbled through the dark hallways, my breath coming in short gasps. Finally, I saw a group of teachers huddled together near the main entrance. They looked just as terrified as I felt. I never found out who the masked figure was or what they wanted. The school never gave a clear explanation of what happened that day. All I know is that I'll never forget the sound of those footsteps, the cold, empty eyes behind that mask, and the feeling of being completely, utterly alone. My name is Ethan, and I'm a 17-year-old senior at Eastwood High. I've always been the kind of guy who likes to stick to a routine. Go to class, hang out with friends, and get home in time for dinner. Nothing out of the ordinary ever happens to me. Or at least that's what I used to think. But that day changed everything. It started like any other day. I was finishing up some work in the library when the lockdown announcement blared over the intercom. Attention, students and staff. This is a lockdown. I repeat, this is not a drill. My heart jumped. It does. The librarian moved quickly, locking the doors, and everyone else dove under tables. But for some reason, I panicked. Instead of staying put, I found myself running out into the hallway. My feet pounded against the floor as I sprinted down the hall. I had no plan, no idea where I was going, just a gut feeling that I needed to move. I turned a corner and suddenly found myself in a hallway I'd never seen before. It was strange. The walls were old, the paint peeling and faded. Dust coated the floor, and the lights flickered weakly above me. I slowed down, trying to figure out where I was. This part of the school wasn't familiar at all. I'd never been down here before. It felt like stepping into another world, one that had been forgotten by time. As I walked further, I noticed the hallway was completely silent, too quiet. I tried to calm myself, thinking maybe this was just an old part of the school I hadn't noticed before, but something felt off. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, and I could barely see more than a few feet ahead of me in the dim light. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, relieved to see messages from my friends. But as I read through them, confusion set in. "Where are you? We're all in the gym." "Heard they spotted someone near the cafeteria." "Stay safe, man. Don't move." Their messages didn't make sense. How could they be in the gym when I had just left the library? And what was this about someone near the cafeteria? Nothing was adding up. My hands started to shake and I realized I was completely alone in this strange, forgotten hallway. I tried to reply, but just then my phone's battery died. The screen went black and I was cut off from the outside world. Panic set in as I realized I was trapped here with no way to call for help. That's when I heard it. Whispers. Faint, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. I spun around looking for the source, but saw nothing. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the walls surrounding me. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, as if someone was walking just behind me. I backed up against the wall, my heart racing. The footsteps stopped, but the whispers continued, now right in my ear. I couldn't make out the words, but they sounded angry, desperate. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I was paralyzed with fear. The minutes dragged on like hours. The whispers and footsteps coming and going, always just out of sight. I tried to find my way back, but the hallway seemed to twist and turn, leading me deeper into the darkness. It felt like a nightmare, but I knew I was wide awake. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the lockdown was lifted. The announcement came over the intercom, but it sounded distant, almost unreal. I ran, stumbling through the dark until I finally found myself back in the main part of the school. The lights were on, and I could hear students talking and laughing as they headed home. I rushed to the nearest teacher, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I tried to explain where I had been, but the words wouldn't come out right. The teacher looked at me like I was crazy. "What hallway? There's no hallway like that in this school," she said, her voice full of doubt. But I knew what I had seen, what I had heard. I wasn't imagining it. I insisted, but no one believed me. They said I must have been in shock, that I'd gotten lost in an unfamiliar part of the building. Later, I found out that the hallway I was in had been sealed off years ago. After a student had gone missing there, they never found him. People said his spirit haunted that part of the school, but I never believed in ghosts until now. No one knew I was there. No one even remembered that hallway existed, but I did. And I'll never forget the whispers, the footsteps, or the fear that gripped me in that dark, forgotten hallway. I never went back to Eastwood High after that. Some things are better left in the past where they belong.